370.
It's been 11 years since the disappearance of Flight MH370.
Could these fishermen be amongst the last people to have seen Flight MH370?
In a world wired to watch everything, a 270-ton jet vanished without a trace. For years, satellites searched the skies, ships scoured oceans, and billions disappeared, chasing silence. Then, in 2019, a fisherman surfaced with a GPS and a memory he couldn't bury.
I was fishing when I saw the plane. It looks strange, flying low, Azid tells me. I told my friend that's not normal. Normally it flies at 35,000 feet.
Before asking whether he was right, we have to understand just how completely the world failed to find the plane. Billions spent, nothing found. It should have been impossible. A Boeing 777 vanishing in the age of satellites and smartphones. But in the early hours of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 slipped off radar and seemed to slip off Earth itself. What followed wasn't just a tragedy. It was a failure of global proportions. Over the next several years, more than 24 nations mounted the largest, most expensive search in aviation history. Ships equipped with deep-sea sonar scanned hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. Planes flew endless search patterns. Supercomputers modeled ocean currents. Analysts obsessed over every blip, ping, and possible signal. But none of it brought the plane home. By 2018, after nearly $200 million had been spent, and the search zone stretched wider than most countries, the official operation was suspended. Not a single confirmed image of the wreckage had ever been found in the deep southern Indian Ocean, where investigators believed the plane had gone down. All that effort, all that certainty, and still no answers. And yet, amid the hum of servers and the drone of search vessels, a single voice would soon rise from a different place entirely. Not from a lab, not from a war room, but from the deck of a fishing boat 5 years after the world had moved on. Routine sky, silent descent. The night began with nothing unusual. At 12:41 a.m. on March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 lifted off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, bound for Beijing. On board, 239 people, families heading home, business travelers, students, tourists. The weather was calm, the crew experienced. The plane, a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the safest ever built. At 1:19 a.m., somewhere above the South China Sea, the co-pilot radioed a final sign-off to Malaysian Air Traffic Control. "Good night, Malaysian 370." It would be the last words ever heard from the plane. 2 minutes later, its transponder went dark. MH370 vanished from civilian radar. No mayday, no call for help. Just a quiet erasure. But the plane didn't crash, not yet. Military radar soon picked up a strange turn. MH370 had veered sharply left, cutting back across the Malaysian peninsula and heading west, away from its original path. It crossed over the country, slipped past Penang Island, and entered the Strait of Malacca. It was now in a completely different corridor of airspace, heading toward the open ocean. This twist is more than a detail. It's the pivot that makes one fisherman's story possible. Because at the exact moment when the world lost the plane on screens, it was entering the skies above his world. A narrow, crowded waterway where boats like his floated quietly in the dark. The man who looked up. Rusli Kuzman was not a radar technician or satellite analyst. He was a fisherman, 42 years old, weathered by salt and sun, with decades of tide and instinct behind him. That night, around 2:30 a.m., his modest vessel drifted near the northern mouth of the Strait of Malacca. No engines roared, no cities glowed, just waves, starlight, and silence. Then he saw it, a massive aircraft arcing through the sky, not descending with control, but faltering, veering, swaying. Rusli would later describe it as moving like a broken kite, zigzagging with a strange mechanical unease. It made no sound, but behind it, something deeply wrong. A thick trail of black smoke. He watched, transfixed, as the plane tilted forward and disappeared into the sea. Then came the smell. The air turned acidic. A stinging chemical stench clung to the boat, sharp enough to send his crew scrambling below deck. Rusli stood alone at the rail, the sour air thick in his lungs, the sky now quiet again. He didn't just remember the moment, he recorded it. Pulling out his GPS, he saved the coordinates. But he said nothing. For 5 years, Rusli kept his story sealed in a pouch beneath his fishing logs. Maybe he feared no one would believe him. Maybe he thought it wasn't his place. Or maybe he knew what he had seen wasn't supposed to exist. Smoke, silence, and stench. When Rusli finally came forward in 2019, he brought more than a story. He held up the GPS device he had used that night and placed his hand on the Quran before speaking. But for many aviation experts, one detail stood out more than any map or memory: the smell. Rusli described it as a thick, acrid chemical stench that rolled over the deck in the seconds after the crash. It burned the throat and stuck to the air. For a brief moment, the sea itself seemed to recoil. That one haunting detail matched something that had long been whispered, but rarely investigated: a fire. Flight MH370's cargo manifest revealed something potentially dangerous. Over 200 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries. Packed in the forward cargo hold, these batteries were known to overheat, ignite, and burn with toxic fumes. But tucked into the same shipment was something far stranger. Over 200 kilograms of vaguely labeled Motorola radio accessories. Items never fully explained or accounted for. What if one of them ignited? A fire in the cargo hold could have knocked out communication systems, filled the cockpit with fumes, and rendered the crew unconscious before they could react. The plane, still on autopilot, might have turned back in a final, failing attempt to reach safety before descending, just as Rusli described: the smoke, the silence, the stench. It was more than a hunch. It was a chemical signature left behind on the sea air, recorded not by machine, but by human breath. The fire they ignored. If the crash happened in the Strait of Malacca, as Rusli claimed, why did the world search 4,000 miles away? The answer lies in data, specifically the satellite pings from a British firm called Inmarsat. After MH370 vanished from radar, its satellite communication system kept sending automated signals, handshakes, for nearly 7 hours. These weren't messages from the crew, but simple hourly pings confirming the plane's systems were still connected. From these signals, analysts drew 2 possible flight arcs, one north, across Central Asia, and one south, deep into the Indian Ocean. Authorities chose the southern arc. They calculated fuel range, timing, and signal strength, then modeled the plane flying until it ran out of fuel and crashed into remote waters southwest of Australia. It was a bold leap of faith in math, one that moved ships, planes, and resources thousands of miles away from the Strait of Malacca. Rusli's account didn't fit the model. A crash at 2:30 a.m. in the Strait contradicted the idea that the plane was flying until 8:19 a.m. Official investigators dismissed it. No matter his GPS or his oath, the data said otherwise. But the data had assumptions baked in about altitude, speed, direction. And no satellite ever saw the plane. It only listened for signals. If the system was damaged or malfunctioning, what seemed like a flight path might have been echoes from a plane already lost. Truth split by ocean. In July 2015, over a year after MH370 disappeared, a single piece of wreckage washed ashore on Reunion Island, a flaperon confirmed to be from the missing aircraft. It was the first hard evidence the plane had broken apart. More fragments later surfaced across coastlines in Mozambique, Madagascar, and Tanzania. For many, this confirmed the Southern Arc theory. Oceanographers mapped regional currents, and drift models suggested that debris from a southern Indian Ocean crash could eventually reach Africa. The narrative seemed to hold until Rusli's coordinates were plugged into those same models. Independent researchers ran reverse drift simulations, starting from the exact point Rusli claimed the plane fell. And to their surprise, the same African coastlines could still be reached. The current paths overlapped. The fragments didn't rule out his version of events. So now 2 stories existed. One, a set of satellite pings pointing south, reinforced by debris scattered across distant beaches. The other, a fisherman's sworn testimony, GPS evidence, and a first-hand account of black smoke and chemical fumes. They couldn't both be true. Either the plane flew for 7 more hours, or it sank silently in the strait as Rusli watched. If the data was wrong, then years of searching and millions spent had missed the truth. If Rusli was wrong, then it meant rejecting a human witness in favor of cold numbers. Somewhere between those two was a grave no one had found. The coordinates we abandoned. When Rusli finally came forward in 2019, holding up his GPS device and marking the spot where he believed MH370 had crashed, he expected someone to listen. He had coordinates, precise, direct, specific. Not probabilities or models, a place. But nothing happened. No vessels were dispatched, no divers were sent. No underwater drones scanned the depths. The location, situated just beyond Malaysian military radar and within one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, remained untouched. Officials stayed focused on the southern Indian Ocean, where drift models suggested wreckage might be. Rusli's X on the map was quietly filed away. He waited, then watched as private firms resumed multi-million-dollar search operations far from his claim. Ocean Infinity, equipped with state-of-the-art sonar and autonomous subs, combed a vast area the size of Texas, nearly 9,000 miles from where Rusli said the plane went down. Why? Some pointed to bureaucratic inertia, others to institutional pride, or a blind faith in satellite data. But one thing is certain, no one ever tested Rusli's evidence, and that evidence had now grown. His location lined up with last known military radar. It matched reverse ocean drift, and it aligned with a theory, fire, smoke, chemical failure, that explained every silence and every turn. The world had a specific lead. It chose a probable one instead. Some truths float, others sink. Until MH370 is found, the only gravestone it has is a set of numbers from a fishing boat in the dark. If the ocean's ready to give up its secret, are we ready to listen? Drop your take in the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next search.